This morning, we're going to kick off the event with our physician assistant session, which is going to be led by Becca Stephen, who is a PA herself. Then again, at 11, we're going to hear from our Assistant Dean of Enrollment on the ins and outs of how to get into medical school. And that's titled Parent and Teacher, but that's great information for anyone who's considering medical school. And then we'll have another session at 1:30 on food allergy from one of our recent graduates, Dr. Rosovic. So for now, Rebecca would love to hear from you guys. So be thinking of questions, and then at the end of the session, we'll give you that opportunity to ask her anything you've been thinking about. So as for now, I will hand it over to her.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This session is a little bit different because I am not a student of the PA program. I'm actually one of the faculty members. I know a lot of the other sessions you have are student run. The reason that is twofold. One, because we're actually a new program on campus. We just started our first class about 13 days ago. So we have our first set of students in their first year. And unfortunately, they had several exams and lectures this week, so we couldn't pick one of them to pull out and talk to you guys. But I'm very excited to talk to you about both about the PA program and then about my experience, because at one time I was a student and a student in PA school. So what I'm going to do is a very short presentation, just a couple of slides about PAs and kind of PA programs, and then kind of turn it over to see if there's any questions from you all. So I'm going to share my screen. And we'll start with just a little PowerPoint. So again, I am the Director of Admissions for the PA program here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences. So let's start with just a little bit about the PA profession. So what is a PA? So PA, of course, stands for Physician Assistant. We are medical providers who diagnose illness, develop and manage treatment plans, prescribe medications, and often serve as a patient's principal healthcare professional. We'll talk about the training. PAs are very versatile and collaborative. We practice in every state and in every specialty. You might hear a lot of different words in description for a PA: physician associate, mid-level provider, advanced practice provider, but all in all, they equal physician assistant. Recently, we had a legislative change where the National PA Collaborative Group decided that they wanted to change the name officially to physician associate from physician assistant. So you might hear that one more frequently moving forward. So how are PAs educated? There are approximately 250 PA programs in the United States. During that, they're on average about 27 months or 3 academic years. You do about 2,000 hours of clinical rotations, and at the end of the program, you're educated at a master's degree level. Currently in the state of Oklahoma, there are 5 physician assistant programs. After you, to obtain a license, a PA must graduate from an accredited PA program, pass a certification exam. It's called the PANCE, P-A-N-C-E, the Physician Assistant National Certification Exam. To maintain your certification, you must complete a recertification exam every 10 years, and you must continue to do 100 hours of CME or continued medical education every 2 years. We also are required to log with so that's national certification. And then here in Oklahoma specifically, you're also required to complete hours for your Oklahoma license as well. The PA profession was established in 1967. There are approximately 140,000 PAs currently practicing in the United States, and PAs have more than 400 million patient interactions per year. So what do patients say about PAs? In a recent 2014 Harris poll, 93% of patients say PAs are trusted healthcare providers, 92% saying having a PA made it easier to get a medical appointment, and 91% say PAs improve the quality of healthcare. So where do PAs practice? Well, we practice in every setting: hospital, urgent care, outpatient office or clinic, primary care, surgical specialties, internal medicine, emergency medicine, pediatric, and then of course your other group. In Oklahoma, 43% of PAs practice in an office-based practice. So that'd be like if you make an appointment with your family doctor, a pediatrician, a dermatologist, something that's primarily outpatient. 28% practice in a hospital setting. 31% are in primary care, which is like family medicine, and 15% practice in surgery, which includes subspecialties. So rather than just general surgery, possibly you have a surgeon who works with ear, nose, and throat, or cardiac surgery like the heart surgery. So what are the duties of a physician assistant? Specific duties do depend on the practice setting, the level of experience, your specialty, and of course, state laws. Here's a list of some of the things that PAs can do. We can take medical histories, conduct physical exams, diagnose and treat illness, order and interpret tests, develop treatment plans, prescribe medication, counsel and preventative care, perform procedures, assist in surgeries, make rounds in hospitals, or conduct clinical research. Most of us don't just do one of those things, we do several of them at once. So when we're talking about the PA profession, you might wondering, is this the right field for me? With a lot of different medical professions out there, how do you know what you'd want to do? So some of the highlights of the PA profession that I like to mark are team-based healthcare. So something very specific to the PA profession is how we work in a team-based collaborative healthcare model. The reason that is because physician assistants work under what we call an SP or supervising physician. So your license is in fact linked to a physician's, either a DO or an MD's, that you work on a team with to make sure that you have that team-based healthcare for all your patients. Reduced training time. So this is this is especially one that students appreciate. So the average PA program, as I mentioned before, is anywhere from 2.5 to 3 years. Our program here on OSU's campus is 28 months, 13 months of classroom training, followed by 15 months of clinical training. And then you're out there working. We don't really have a whole lot of PA residencies or fellowships. They are starting to develop those, but they're not very common right now. So essentially, after you finish your training within your PA program, you're ready to hit the workforce and you're ready to get out there and work. What that looks like is typically that means that your first 1 to 2 years is really on the job training and you're learning all the time. That's why it's important, going back to team-based healthcare, that you're in a team that you feel confident working in. The other thing that's really common, highlight of the PA profession, is the ability to change a practice field. So what that means is you don't have to do another residency or a fellowship or do any extra training in order to switch from one specialty to another. I will talk about this later, but I spent 6 years working in family practice and now I work in cardiology. Now there definitely is the opportunity to need to be trained for that special new field. However, there's total flexibility to be able to change. Maybe you want to do urgent care and then you want to do outpatient dermatology. Maybe you do surgery for a few years and now you want to do family practice. You have a lot of options and a flexibility to change with just whatever notice you have to give your current job. So what about other professions and how are they different? So the two that I typically like to highlight are physician and nurse practitioner. And the reason I do that, I'm aware that there are so many other amazing medical professionals out there, but these are going to be the two that either are most closely linked or possibly most closely compared to the physician assistant profession. So first off, physician. So when I say physician, I'm referring to MD, which is medical doctor, or DO, which is doctor of osteopathic medicine. Here on the OSU campus, we have the DO program, which I know you will or may hear a lot about while you're on this Zoom. And it's a wonderful program. So if we're talking about physicians, the main difference between a physician assistant and a physician is of course going to be the level of supervision and the license. So like I mentioned previously, our license is linked to that of a supervising physician. So we would spend our time working directly with an MD or a DO while we're in practice. Now that does not mean that we're always there at the same time. Every state has their own supervision laws. So for example, in Oklahoma, you actually just have to have a physician consult within a reach. Essentially, you have to be able to get a hold of them by telephone or computer or some other form of media. They don't actually have to be on site while you're practicing. So that's just something I like to highlight. So if you become a physician assistant, you would always work with a physician. Naturally, if you choose to go on to become a physician, DO or MD, it is a little bit longer training, as we discussed. You do specialize, so you pick your profession, you do a residency, possibly a fellowship in that area. You don't have the flexibility to change your practice unless you want to complete another residency. But of course, when you're done, there are no supervising laws. You can go and start your own practice, build kind of whatever you want, hire your own PAs if that's the case. The other profession that you'll hear a lot of description about is nurse practitioner. The reason I bring that up is because when you hear the term advanced practice provider, it really is an umbrella for both physician assistants and nurse practitioners. Now, the main difference between the two fields is the way that we're trained. Physician assistants are trained on the medical model, so our training is much like that of a DO or MD. We teach about the science of the diagnoses and how to make them. Nurse practitioners trained on the nursing model. So typically what happens is a nurse practitioner is an RN first, and then they go on to get their nurse practitioner license. Maybe they're an LPN, then an RN, they're a nurse practitioner. Now, with that said, when you're out in the practice setting, especially in the state of Oklahoma, a PA or an NP, as they're referred to, likely would look very similar in their authority and their function within a team-based scenario. So while the training is different, when they're actually functioning as a provider, you may notice that they seem very similar. A lot of big health systems treat them the same. So those are just two professions that I like to highlight the big differences of, because a lot of times when people are choosing, those are ones that kind of are in the mix. So maybe you're interested in being a PA. So how do you prepare yourself? So of course you need a college education. Since the PA profession are typically a master's degree program, especially the one on our campus, you do have to have a bachelor's degree to apply. Your bachelor's degree can be in progress when you're doing your application, but you do have to complete it prior to starting the program. So big question I get is what degree? What should I major in? Well, we have a vast variety of different degrees that apply to our program. We have everything from the student who's a little bit, choosing a little bit different path and maybe they've done business administration, to the very typical bachelor's of biology or zoology or microbiology. What I tell students is definitely find something you're passionate about because that will make learning easier. If that happens to be a bachelor's degree in, music, then I definitely say go for it. We are always looking for a unique candidate. With that said, we do have most programs, especially ours, do have prerequisite courses that you have to complete to be able to apply for admission. And so in order to do those, a lot of times students will choose a degree path that kind of closely matches so you don't have to take a lot of additional courses. With that said, we love to see different kinds of learners and different kinds of degrees come through in our application pool. If you're going to apply for the PA profession, you need to maintain a strong GPA while you're studying that undergraduate degree. We recommend shadowing healthcare providers. That way you can see what different types of fields of medicine there are and what different types of providers are like. Even if I definitely want to be a PA, or I definitely want to be an athletic trainer, or I definitely want to be a physician, I still encourage students to go and kind of spend a day in different types of fields just to make sure that you're in the one that you want to be in. That way you'll get an idea of what a day in the life of someone may be. And then I always say have fun, because when you're in college, when you're an undergrad, when you're in, doing your life before maybe PA school and then working forever, I always say definitely make sure you enjoy yourself while you're doing it. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about my path, and just let you know kind of how I got to the point I'm at, kind of from a student perspective. And then, of course, if anyone has any questions about anything, I'm more than happy to help. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time talking specifically about the OSU PA program, but we have a very robust website, which I'll give you at the end, that talks about our admissions, our prerequisites, our mission and vision of the program, and we'd love for you to review that. So I am not originally from Oklahoma. I'm actually a little bit of a transplant. I moved here when I was 10, actually from Canada, so a little bit of a strange path there. I went to high school in Ardmore, Oklahoma. If anyone knows where that is, it's in southern Oklahoma. I always say about halfway between Dallas and Oklahoma City. So that kind of tells you right where it is. They got a Chick-fil-A after I had moved on. And so that kind of put them on the map, I think, for a road stop. So I grew up in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And then upon graduating high school, I did my undergraduate at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, OU. And I got my degree in zoology. I was pre-PA at the time, which helped me focus my prerequisites and be able to know what I was going to complete. So undergraduate in zoology, pre-PA. I was fortunate enough to get accepted into PA school, my first round of applications. And I actually did come to the University of Oklahoma program here in Tulsa. When I went to PA school, OU happened to be the only school that had a PA program in the state. They actually have two now, one in Oklahoma City and one in Tulsa. Oklahoma City University also has one. northeastern state in Tahlequah has one. And then, of course, we have Oklahoma State University, which I might be biased, but of course, I think is the best one. So I came to I came to Tulsa. I finished the OU Tulsa PA program, and upon graduating, I took a job in family practice. So I worked at a pretty socialized urban family practice in downtown Tulsa. Loved my job, became very close to a lot of my patients, and I worked there for about 6 years when a colleague of mine said, "Hey, I heard OSU is starting a PA program. Maybe you should think about applying to work for them." Well, teaching has always been a passion of mine. Student development has always been a passion of mine. So I said, maybe I'll go for it. Well, here I am. So I took a job with OSU in the very beginning of 2020. So I've been here about a year and a half. Of course, 2020 was not what anyone expected, but it's still been a fabulous time. Upon starting to work for the program, becoming a clinical assistant professor, I also took a job in the cardiology clinic downtown with OSU Medicine. So I'm fortunate enough to have switched specialties. Like I mentioned, I worked in family practice, which actually had a pediatric focus, and now I work in cardiology. Definitely a learning curve. I spent a lot of time, reading up and revising diagnostic guidelines and making sure I knew what I was doing before I started practicing. Even then, my supervising physicians have been great teachers, and they definitely lead me on the way to kind of help me out from day to day. Rather than just working, I also kind of donate my time to volunteerism if that's something that's interesting with all of you. So being a PA, I am able to continue to volunteer as a medical provider. And I do so at a clinic in East Tulsa, which is actually, West Tulsa. My goodness, my map today. A clinic out in West Tulsa that's in a very underserved area. So I volunteer there once a month. And donate my time as a medical provider to that clinic. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, kind of what my path was. I have friends that work in all different specialties. Here amongst our faculty, the main kind of core faculty that we have, there are 4 of us. One works in the internal medicine clinic, and she actually is building an osteoporosis clinic. One works in the HIV specialty clinic, and then the other one actually started an internal medicine procedures clinic. So he spends his day doing lumbar punctures, paracentesis, things like that, kind of outpatient treatments and diagnostic testing for patients that need them that are referred over. So just to kind of give you a little taste of different things that people can do. My colleague that does the outpatient treatment, he also moonlights at St. Francis as part of the trauma team. So he really likes the blood and gut stuff. And so he'll tell you that's where he thrives. And so he's been working trauma. So he does a lot of night shifts in the ER on the weekends. He tells us it's because he loves it. I'll take his word for it. I don't know. I can't lose my sleep. So he's a little bit different there, but he does that and he really enjoys it. And so just to kind of show you different fields and different areas that PAs can work in. That's kind of a little bit about my path and my career. This is our physician assistant email, physician.assistant@okstate.edu. And then there's our website. And as I said, our website holds the program's information about admissions, about prerequisites that you have to complete, the mission and vision, the program curriculum. So if you're interested to see kind of what the curriculum looks like, the OSU program, the last thing I'll kind of leave you with before I see if there's any questions. People always ask me what's your favorite thing about the OSU program, and that's our interprofessional education. So we have built our curriculum within the DO program. And so there's a lot of shared learning events and experiences because we figure if you're going to work with a physician your life, why not train with them? And so that's kind of how we built it out. So we're very excited. As I said, our first class started on July 1st. They're loving it. They already are a little sleep deprived and study too hard, but they're very excited as they move forward. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite thing about our program is that interprofessional collaboration. So that's where I'll leave just my little presentation. I'll stop my screen share here. And then I don't know if anyone has any questions, or Ashley, if there's anything else you'd like me to cover, I'll ask you.
Oh, yeah. So now's a great time if you have any questions or anything you thought of while Becca was speaking, if you want to just unmute and ask those, or if you want to send those in the chat so we can get those answered for you. So Becca, I know that you said whenever you were in college, you did the pre-PA. Have you always known that you wanted to be a physician assistant?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say I knew forever. I knew I wanted to work in medicine. So when I was in high school, we actually had a career day where a lot of different types of providers came to my high school to talk. And there was a PA that came and spoke to us, and I was very interested in what they were saying. And I kind of highlighted my three favorite things about our profession: the reduced training time, the ability to switch fields, and then also I'm really big on team-based everything. And so I really loved that idea. And so I did know before I went to college that I wanted to be a PA, but that's not always the case. Some people decide while they're in college what field they want to go into, and that works just fine too.
And if you do want to come to our physician assistant program here on OSU's campus, do you have to go to OSU to get your bachelor's?
Absolutely not. We entertain applications from students all over, not only the state of Oklahoma, but across the United States. And so we have a central application, and we love, now, of course, we love to see OSU students come through, but we also love to see students from everywhere else in the state. We have several students in our first class that are what we deem non-traditional. So they worked for a few years and then they completed their degree at the same time. So we really kind of love to see just any kind of learner that wants to come our way.
Oh, awesome. So I know you mentioned that there's, I think it was 13 months of on-campus learning and then 15 months of being out. Is that similar to like medical students where they do rotations in different specialties?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. So yes, it's very similar. So people sometimes think of a PA program as a condensed version of medical school, and it's not an inaccurate description. The reason why we say that is because we're trying to train you quicker, but still efficiently and well-rounded, so you can get out there and start working. And so if you look at the PA model, the first 13 months is kind of like your first 2 years of medical school. So we teach both summers, and we kind of make sure everything we can gets covered, and then you go out, you do month by month rotations. If you go to medical school, your first 2 years are in the classroom, and then your second 2 years are rotations. And so we kind of push that together in that 28-month block and try to get you as much information as we can. They say it's like drinking from a fire hydrant into that small amount of time, so then you're ready to get out there in the workforce.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that was all the questions that I had. So thank you again for being here with us today. I know that was a lot of great information and a lot of great takeaways from that. If anyone thinks of any questions, feel free to shoot those over to me and I can pass those on to Becca, or if you got her email address, that physician.assistant@okstate.edu, feel free to send those over. But thank you again for being here with us today, Becca. All right, well, welcome back. It's so good to see you guys again this morning. I know a lot of you guys are sticking with us for all these sessions, so we love to have you. So this morning we are going to have our presentation on medical school. It's led by Jeff Hackler. Again, we are going to be recording this session, so at the end of the week we'll send those links out. And this afternoon we have one more session. It's going to be at 1:30 with Dr. Rosovic on food allergies, what those look like, how to treat those. But as for now, I will hand it over to Jeff.
All right, good afternoon, y'all. I'm Jeff Hackler. I'm the Assistant Dean for Enrollment Management. What that means is that I sit on the admissions committee and I supervise recruitment. That means when we interview medical students, I meet with the prospective students every interview day, and then sit on the selection committee. So what I'm going to do is kind of do a run through of things that I would want to know as a parent of a prospective medical student. I can tell you that I'm happy anytime y'all have questions, feel free to stop me and we can pause on any topic that interests you, or if you have additional questions, please do that. I'll set some time aside at the end too for questions, but we've got plenty of time. If there's something along the way, please stop me, but I'm going to jump right into it. So let me start. So we're a Center for Health Sciences, OSU. We have a medical school here, but we've been around for a long time, so we're very established. We were started in 1972 and became part of the OSU system in 1988. Being an academic health center means we don't just have the medical school. We also have the PA program. We have a forensic science program. We have biomedical science program. The medical school has two campuses. I'm located in Tulsa, so that's our urban campus. And then we also have a location in Tahlequah. So we've got a couple of options. Last year was the first year that we had our medical school class in Tahlequah. We had 54 students there. So why study medicine at OSU? A lot of these factors go into that decision. Is number one. I'll kind of touch on each of these individually, but I'll say with affordability, OSU, if you're from the state of Oklahoma, if you're a resident, it's probably going to be half as much for tuition and fees as it is at an out-of-state medical school. Medical school is not cheap at all. So I can tell you, we're one of the most affordable medical schools in the country, and our tuition is $25,000 per year, roughly. If you go out of state, you're looking at schools that have annual tuition of about $50,000 per year. So it's definitely an expensive endeavor. You can see all the other things, and I'll kind of touch on these individually. Something about OSU we're proud of is we're very student focused. We're relatively small. We have a total class size approved for 165. With the two campuses, we have 115 in Tulsa, and then we have 50 in Tahlequah, which allows us to have really low faculty to student ratios. So we have roughly 3 students for every faculty member. That's definitely nice because if your student has a question, they can come into office hours and meet with the faculty. Our faculty are extremely accessible, and you hear that from students all the time, that they can come talk to them, ask them questions about material. The students get to know each other very well, and having the two campuses, that's particularly true. I know talking to students in Tahlequah, they say they know all of their classmates, know their personal stories. And that's something nice depending on what setting the student feels is best for them. And then we have state-of-the-art learning resources and facilities. OSU has done a fantastic job of updating all of our facilities. And I can say we've got some of the nicest facilities in the country, regardless of the campus, both in Tulsa and in Tahlequah. We have brand new facilities specifically focused on students, really. So I don't think you're going to find better resources anywhere in the country. You can see what we're talking about. There on the top left slide, you can see we do a lot of video conferencing and telemedicine across the state, and we have the largest telemedicine network in Oklahoma. We've got a simulation center right there in the top right, and that's from our Tulsa campus. We have the same simulation center in Tahlequah, but we have the only accredited facility for simulation training in the entire region. So we're somebody that a lot of other training programs look to come for training experiences, a lot of team-based learning. So we're not just training physicians, but we're training nurses and PAs all together, because providing healthcare is a team-based activity. So we want them to train in that setting as well. The bottom left there, you can see a lot of our clinic training space. We want to make sure students are prepared to interact with patients before they go out on clinical rotations. And so we allow them to do that by working with standardized patients who are essentially actors who come in and pretend to have certain illnesses and diseases so our students can train with them. And then the bottom right is a artist rendering of our campus in Tahlequah. So it's just opened this past December. It's absolutely beautiful. I was there last night. A large portion of the budget is committed to art. So it's beautiful outside, but it's got Native American art throughout the facility. So it's a real treasure for us, and it's been extremely attractive. Students love it there. Something we're famous for at OSU is our supportive community. OSU undergrad, OSU medical school is known to have a family atmosphere. So we're very welcoming, make sure that everyone feels like they're part of the family here. We've got an active student life. All of our students are involved in a lot of clubs, and the clubs are required to have some type of community outreach to make sure they're making an impact in our community. We have a student success center, and that success center is focused on making sure students can achieve their academic potential. So students report to the success center, and what our professionals are going to do is going to teach your student how to make the most of their learning time. I think anytime you make that transition, whether it's from high school to college or from college to medical school, you have to adjust. And we see a lot of students as they come into medical school that they've been successful, they've done well, but medical school is kind of a whole new beast. So they have to make sure they understand how they learn material best, how they should be studying. And so these facilitators at our Student Success Center work with each student, make sure they know tailor an approach for them that's going to work for them. And that's something most of our students take advantage of, because you hear the analogy all the time that medical school is like drinking from a fire hose. And so we want to make sure we prepare our students for success and they understand how they're going to learn the material and retain it best. And then the last piece there is wellness programs. Anyone you've talked to has probably said that medical school is extremely stressful. So we want to make sure we're taking care of our students and giving them a good school life balance. We have a fitness center on campus, both of our campuses, with free fitness classes. So if they want to take a moment to de-stress, they can participate in a free yoga class. They can do high impact interval training, whatever their approach is to fitness, we can help them out with that. We have courses that help teach meditation, de-stressing activities. We teach them about having courses for meal prep. So if time is a crunch, that you can get all your meals prepped over the weekend and then kind of grab and go during the week. All kinds of things. We're making sure that students are able to kind of relax and balance their lives as they go through this very stressful academic environment. So about OSU is we are an osteopathic program, which means we confer the DO degree rather than a MD degree. So the osteopathic philosophy really hinges on the body has an ability to heal itself. So what you have to do is you have to remove impediments and barriers to the body healing itself. And that's the basic approach for osteopathic medicine. It's holistic in the sense that we believe that health is all about mind, body, and spirit. So you have to align those things, make sure you understand the patient, and get those things all in a healthy approach to make sure you can achieve health. And then DOs have a focus on preventative care. So that a lot of that is through primary care medicine, whether that's family medicine, pediatrics, internal medicine, or OBGYN. We're focused on making sure we prevent illness and take care of things before they arise. And so that's a big focus of our training. If you compare DOs to MDs, here's a quick table that kind of runs through the differences and the comparisons. For the medical school curriculum, you can see there at the top, they're essentially the same. You do 4 years of training. The first 2 years are in biomedical sciences and systems courses. The second 2 years are where students go out and they conduct rotations where they shadow a physician in different specialties. The only difference between DO medical school and MD, as you can see there, is that DOs learn osteopathic manipulative medicine, OMM. That's where students learn to diagnose and treat patients using their hands. So that's additional training that DOs receive. A lot of our students like learning that because it's an additional tool for working with patients. You see a lot of times that if a doctor has a patient walk in with back pain or has been in a car accident, a typical MD approach might be to use a painkiller. DOs can use OMM to say, let's see if we can diagnose, treat you using our hands. If we can take care of you, that's great. We don't have to worry about prescribing an addictive medication. And so that's something a lot of our students like. It also helps reinforce a lot of the principles of anatomy as they go through an OMM lab. They start feeling on their classmates' muscles and tissues. So it's helpful in learning that material. In terms of residency training, there's no difference. To become a physician, you complete medical school and then must complete a residency training program. Those programs are at least 3 years long. They can be up to 7 years. There's no difference. DOs can get into any residency program in the country. One thing for MDs is when they graduate, there are certain residency programs that have osteopathic recognition, which means you have to have completed at least 200 hours in osteopathic manipulative training. So the MDs can't get into those programs unless they go through additional training after they graduate. That's fine for DOs because that helps protect a lot of those residency programs for DO graduates. In terms of licensure, either DOs or MDs can practice in all 50 states. They can enter any specialty that they choose. Compensation doesn't depend on whether you're a DO or an MD. That's really dependent on what specialty you choose to move into. And then that treatment philosophy, again, DOs have the holistic approach and they focus on the body's ability to heal itself. MDs are a little bit more focused on symptoms. How do we alleviate the symptoms? DOs want to make sure they're taking care of the underlying condition. How do you become a doctor? So to become a doctor, you complete college. That could be anywhere from 3 to 4 or more years. Major in whatever you want, take the prerequisite courses, develop relationships with professors. After you complete the college, then you will matriculate to medical school, which is a 4-year program. After 4 years of medical school, you'll move on to residency training. And I mentioned before that can be anywhere from 3 to 7 years. So if you do something like family medicine or pediatrics, that'll probably be a 3-year program. If you want to do something a little bit more specialized like surgery or neurology, those are going to be longer residency training programs. So you may be a resident for up to 7 years. After you complete that residency training, though, you'll go on to practice as a physician. So one thing we encourage all parents and prospective students to think about is the residency opportunities that are affiliated with a medical school. I know OSU has spent a lot of time and effort investing in residency program development across the state. And so you can see over the past 6 years, we've had only 1 student graduate who didn't match into a residency program, which is a phenomenal rate. That's a rate that a lot of schools aren't going to be able to compare to. I can tell you it's unfortunate, but there are more and more medical schools that are opening across the country, and existing medical schools are growing their class sizes. And as they've done that, this past year, we've produced 10,000 more graduates from medical schools than there are residency slots available. So it's gotten increasingly competitive. We can say at OSU that we've gone out, we've developed residency programs so that we have a residency training slot for every single one of our graduates. I'd encourage any medical school where your child is applying to ask how many slots are affiliated with their medical school because of how competitive it has gotten. A big focus for OSU, though, is our mission is to train primary care physicians for rural and underserved Oklahoma. And we know that if you look at residents, about 80% of them stay and practice within 100 miles of wherever they complete their residency training. So if we want our graduates to go on and take care of Oklahomans, we need to make sure that they can train in their residency program in Oklahoma. This past year, 70% of our graduates stayed in Oklahoma for residency training, which is a phenomenal rate. That's one of the highest rates you're going to find in the country. You can see for the most recent data, that's nearly double the number of graduates that OU Medicine retained in Oklahoma. So we're extremely proud of that. And we have a whole large percentage of graduates who stay in Oklahoma. So I'm going to transition and kind of talk about the application process. So we are getting ready to conclude the past year's application cycle. Our new class starts at the end of the month. We received 4,500 applications for our 165 slots in the medical school. So it's extremely competitive, and I know you're wondering how can you put your child in a position so that they can be competitive. The first thing I'll kind of break down what we're looking for prospective students. And we're focused on Oklahoma. That's part of our mission. So we're looking for students who are from Oklahoma and who attended college in Oklahoma. And that's the first thing. We also have rural and underserved as part of our mission. So we like applicants who come from rural and underserved Oklahoma. A big piece there is the academic capability. So we want to make sure students can get through medical school. So we're taking a look at their grade point average and how they performed in college. We want to see how they did on the medical college admissions test, is the MCAT. That's the standardized exam that you take to apply to medical school. So those are important to us to make sure that they can get through our rigorous curriculum. And then the final piece are personal characteristics. We want to make sure that they exhibit all the personality traits that are important in a physician and are going to make them successful. So you can see there at the top that we've got grit and persistence. I talk to so many medical students who tell me that, you know, it takes smarts to get through medical school, but probably the most important thing is just being able to grind it out when things get tough and have that persistence. So we want to see some demonstration of that when we look at an application. Being a physician is about helping other people. So a lot of what we're looking for is going to be a commitment to community service. Do they have exposure to clinical settings? Have they been working in a hospital or a clinic? And then the other parts that are just important of having good character, whether you have integrity, empathy, leadership, you can be a good team player, you have good communication skills, those are important to us as well. So these are the minimum admissions requirements for entering medical school at OSU. The first piece is the prerequisite science courses. So you have to take 2 semesters of English, 2 semesters of biology plus a lab, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and at least 1 upper division science. I talk to a lot of parents who ask me what should their child major in when they go to college. You know, of course, we see a lot of applicants who have biology and chemistry degrees, something in the sciences, but we also see some applicants who have degrees in history and art, other things. So as long as they take these prerequisite courses, they're going to be eligible to apply to medical school at OSU. You have to have earned a minimum of a 3.0 GPA overall, and then a 2.75 science GPA. You have to earn an MCAT score of at least 492. And to provide you a little context, a 500 on the MCAT is exactly the 50th percentile. And for each point you move up or down, it's about 3 percentile points. So you take 8 points under 500 is about, puts you around 25th percentile and higher is the minimum score that we need to be admitted to OSU. You need to submit 2 applications. So the first one is the primary application that goes through what we call ACOMAS, and that's something you can use to apply to any medical school that's an osteopathic school. Once you designate OSU as a school you're interested in, then we will send you a secondary or a supplemental application that is specific just to OSU. And so every prospective student needs to complete that when they apply. We require that applicants take a situational judgment test so that we can assess their judgment and how they're going to perform when it comes to making decisions in certain situations. We require letters of recommendation, so that could either be from a pre-health committee from a college, or it can be from a faculty who've taught the student in college. And then the final piece is that we require an in-person interview. We've done last year with COVID, we did some virtual interviews as well, but we want to make sure we meet that person, get to know them and see about their personal characteristics and can ask them questions about their application. So those are the minimum requirements. In order to be competitive though, you can see for the class that's going to start here in a couple of weeks, here's what their metrics look like. We have about a 3.6 overall GPA and a 3.6 science GPA is competitive. The MCAT right now is at 503, so that is higher than the 50th percentile. And then we see on average about 80 science credit hours. So again, you can major in whatever you want to, but that's what we typically see. The more science courses you take, of course, the more prepared you're going to be to take that MCAT and score well. In terms of admissions options, and so we've got all of these, and I'll talk about them individually. What you typically see is that traditional admission pathway where you go to college, you apply in your senior year, and hopefully you're accepted right after that and you move into medical school. Maybe you take 2 or 3 years to get into medical school, but that's more the traditional pathway. I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about our 3+1 program, our guaranteed interview program, and then we have a preparatory program with either guaranteed interview or admission that I'll kind of end with, and then we'll discuss dual degrees. So the 3+1 program is a program that you can choose to go into where instead of completing 4 years of college, you would complete 3 years of college, and instead of taking your senior year, you would matriculate into the medical school, and your first year of medical school would count back towards your undergraduate degree. So what that means is instead of doing 4 years of college, 4 years of medicine, you complete that all in 7 years. So that speeds up your pathway to becoming a physician. It also saves you a year of tuition and fees. So that's the 3+1 program. The requirements for participating in our 3+1 program are that you need to attend, if you'd be a full-time student at one of our partner institutions. So we need to make sure that your child is going to a college where they're going to accept our first year medical school curriculum back towards their undergraduate degree. Then you also have to have a 3.5 overall GPA and science GPA and score a minimum of 492 on the MCAT. So that 492 is lower than our typical average, but that's because these students are taking the MCAT a year earlier than most of our applicants. So to prepare for the 3+1 program, the first thing we ask is that students meet with a pre-health advisor where they're attending college. It doesn't matter if they want to do the 3+1 program or do anything. If they're interested in medical school, I would encourage them to talk to that pre-health advisor and get their counsel. They can talk to them about what shadowing opportunities are going to be around, if there are free clinics where they can volunteer, any type of clinical experiences, community service. That pre-health advisor is going to be a great source of information. They'll be able to keep them informed of any events, anything that's changed in medical school admissions requirements. So definitely do that during the freshman year. They'll also help your student select a degree plan. So you can't do 3+1 program with every single degree. There's certain ones that have been approved. So they can tell them based on where they're going to college, which degree plans are part of the 3+1. The student will apply during their sophomore year to medical school. And so the first thing they would need to do is if there's a pre-health committee, the student should schedule a meeting with them. That's essentially an early interview that the student conducts so that the pre-health committee can ask them questions about how prepared they are for medical school and provide information to the medical school. So that pre-health committee writes us a letter and gives us an assessment of how strong they think that candidate is. Once they meet with the pre-health committee, then they'll complete the ACOMAS application by the end of February of their sophomore year, and then complete our secondary application by the end of March. All they need to do is there's a box in that application that says you're applying through the 3+1 program. So if the student checks that box, we will know that they're interested in 3+1 program. To be honest, almost all of our 3+1 program applicants, we have some type of relationship with, whether they've been to recruitment events or we've met them through their pre-health advisors. So we have a pretty good idea of who's going to apply. And I can say for the past several years, we've interviewed every single one of the students who's applied through 3+1 programs. So that's a great way to make sure you get an interview. Even if it doesn't work out for a student on the 3+1 program, they've had that experience of being interviewed by a medical school, and they can apply the following as in their senior year as a traditional applicant if it doesn't work out. The last piece is when they're a junior, they're going to take the MCAT exam, make sure they get that qualifying 492, complete the remaining coursework that's part of their degree plan, and make sure they have one upper division science. And so they'll complete their junior year, and then they will go to medical school the following year if they're accepted. Here are the partner universities. So we've got 3+1 programs at all of these colleges here in the state of Oklahoma. So we have a lot of options if you're students interested in pursuing this path. So I mentioned the guaranteed interview program. GI program. This is essentially, we want to be transparent about what we're looking for in terms of granting a student an interview. So what we're looking for, if you attend one of our partner institutions, then if you score at least a 3.5 overall and science GPA in college, can score a 502 on the MCAT exam, and then have at least 500 clinical hours, something in a health setting. If you earn an A or a B in all of your prerequisite courses and plan to complete a baccalaureate degree, then we will guarantee you that we'll bring you in for an interview. Of course, you'll need to submit that application through ACOMAS and submit the OSU secondary application, but like the 3+1 program, All you need to do is check a box, and once you check that box, we'll see that if you've met the criteria, then we're going to bring you in for an interview. And that helps a lot of students ease their concerns about whether they're going to get an interview or not. They say, you know what, I've done my part, they'll bring me in. And you can see Cody there was one of our guaranteed interview program. She attended OSU undergraduate. So here are the partner universities. So again, we've got a lot of options if your student's interested in pursuing that pathway. And that's really just the traditional pathway, which just as they get to their senior year, they know what they're shooting for to get that interview. So the last one I want to talk about is the certificate program. And the certificate program is for students who do not get admitted to medical school right after they complete college. So if they apply, let's say they had a rough freshman year, pulled their GPA down, maybe they struggle with standardized tests. The certificate program in medical science is a one-year program in OSU's graduate college that's located right here in the Tulsa campus, where they will take courses that mirror medical school curriculum. We'll take a lot of different content areas. We'll provide them with the opportunity to do MCAT preparation course. They're going to learn test taking skills. And if they can earn an A or a B in all their courses and then score a 490 on the MCAT, we will guarantee that we will interview them. And so it's a way for students who may have struggled or may just want to tell us, you know what, I may kind of make sure they get more improved on their medical science coursework. They can show us that they're ready. They can take this year and then apply to medical school. And so you can see how you guarantee that you get an interview. We've got a couple of programs that are affiliated with our certificate program, and it's the Guaranteed Admission Program, the GAP, or the Bridge Program. And so if a student applies to OSU, we get to know them and say, you know what, they interviewed really well. We like their experience. We think they'll be a great physician, but we're a little bit concerned about their ability to get through medical school. Then we can refer them to the certificate program and tell them, you know what, we really like you. If you can go to the certificate program and earn all A's or B's in courses, score 498 on the MCAT, then we're going to guarantee you that we'll accept you in the next year's medical school class. So that's what the guaranteed admissions program is. We also have a bridge program that is similar to guaranteed admission, but it's restricted to students who have a disadvantaged background. So disadvantage can be economic disadvantage. So if they've ever been on public assistance, say they've gotten food stamps, if they've ever been on sooner care, or if they've got an educational disadvantaged background, and that's going to a high school that graduates relatively few students, or it sends relatively few students on to college, then they qualify for our bridge program, which means if they can get all A's and B's in their courses and then score a 492 on the MCAT, we'll guarantee them admission to the next medical school class. I'll say about the bridge program, it's highly competitive. We only admit 10 students to the program each year, but it's a good way for us to fulfill our mission that we want folks from rural and underserved backgrounds to have a pathway to get into medical school and return to those communities, then they can go through our bridge program. The last piece are dual degree programs. So you may have a student who wants to become a doctor, but they're also interested in some other aspect of a career. So you can see we've got several master's programs. We have a master's in science, in public health, healthcare administration, and in business administration. And then the final program there is a PhD program. And that's for students who are passionate about research, but also want to have a clinical practice. And that's a 7-year program. But if you want to do research and become a physician, then we have a DO PhD program. So your question will be, what are my next steps? I've got a child who does want to become a doctor, and here are the things that I would encourage you to help them do. Is I would have them sign up for OSU Medicine mailings and upcoming events. And that's a good way to meet current students. And a lot of our students can give advice about what to take in undergraduate and college, how to prepare to take the MCAT, what their study strategies were. They can tell them how to get through medical school, the things that are challenging, the things that they love. I think it's just a good way to get to know us. And I can tell you, I attend a lot of the recruitment events, and it kind of takes a layer of stress off when you show up to a medical school interview, you see some people that you know, put you a little bit more at ease. So I would definitely encourage them to do that. We can talk about the latest admissions requirements. So if anything's changed, or if we're looking for any type of different experiences, then we can make sure they've got the latest information. I would encourage your students active in service and extracurricular activities. That's important to us, that there's a history of taking care of other people. I encourage my own daughters to do that. I think in high school, as you get a little bit of experience participating in clubs or different service events, you start to build your self-confidence, and then you are able to take a leadership role as you get into college. And so that's something we want to see. I mentioned earlier that providing healthcare is a team-based exercise, and physicians are the leaders of those teams. So it's helpful to start learning some of those leadership skills while you're in college. The last piece I've got there, that gain the experience in a clinical setting. Either that can be either through volunteers. So if there's a free clinic in their community or around their college, we would encourage that. We see a lot of applicants who've had either a part-time job or some type of job in a healthcare setting. They could be a pharmacy technician, they could be a surgical assistant, they could be an orderly, a certified nurse assistant. We see all types of experiences, but I can tell you a lot of students take this really seriously. And to be competitive, we see, I think the average number of clinical hours for one of our accepted students in the incoming class was 2,000 hours. And that's not something you want to set aside and try to achieve in a year or two. I think it's important to start getting some of those experiences early on, as early as possible. Then the last piece is visit with the college pre-health advisor and instructors. I mentioned that the pre-health advisor is somebody that does this for a living, and they can help guide your student, make sure they're on the right path, taking the right courses, preparing the way they should, that they're getting the right type of experiences before they apply to medical school. The last piece too is that we require at least 2 letters from faculty who have taught the applicant. And you want to make sure your student has had some type of relationships with their faculty before they go and ask them for a letter. So I think it's good to visit faculty during office hours, ask them questions about the material, how you can be better prepared, how you can perform better on examinations. But that's going to be somebody you know you have a relationship with, so you can ask them for a letter later on down the road. So that's really what I have. I've got some questions here to kind of open up anything you all might want to ask me. I'll answer these questions, and if there's something I didn't cover, I certainly encourage you, please ask me. I'm happy to answer anything that you have. The questions, what can we do to best facilitate our child's success? I'll go back to encouraging them right now. I think as early as possible, get them involved in some type of community service. Get them used to giving back to their community and interacting with people. You'll see that that's going to help develop their interpersonal skills, and they'll get more comfortable the more often they do that. What are the classes that are best to take in high school? I'd say focus on those science courses. If you have certainly biology and chemistry, but take any other advanced science courses that they can, that'll prepare them to perform well when they get to college. What undergraduate programs should they pursue? I mentioned that we typically see biology as the most common pre-med major, but we see microbiology, we see chemistry, we see biochemistry. They can do anything they want to. It's a little bit easier to accumulate science hours and prepare for the MCAT if you take a science major, but it can give you a good balance if you take something, maybe it's in the liberal arts, whether it's history or art, and then do a minor in something with science. You can still pursue that path. We've had law graduates apply to medical school, so you know every applicant is different, but that's kind of the landscape of what we commonly see. And then how can I as a parent help my future medical student financially? I can say most of our medical students, it's higher than 90% of them will submit the FAFSA and receive student loans to get through medical school. We've done a pretty good job. We have one of the lower student loan debt loads when they graduate of any medical school in the country. So we help them with financial counseling, but plan on student loans. we offer a variety of scholarships, and we've streamlined that process. So when we have someone who we admit into our medical school class, we send out an application to them. They can apply, and before they start their first day, we'll notify them if they've received a scholarship. We continue to do that process annually with our first, second, and third year medical students, ask them to submit an application, and we gave away nearly $1 million in scholarships this past year. So that's an opportunity. If you have if you're Native American, have a child that's Native American, there's service opportunities. So they can go commit to working in a Native American health clinic or hospital, and they can, for 4 years of medical school, they can receive scholarships to pay for their tuition, their fees, and their cost of living. They just have to commit to going on to practice in one of those settings for 4 years. We've got a number of opportunities through the Physician Manpower Training Commission that if you'll commit to practicing in a rural area for a certain number of years, they will also provide you with scholarship assistance. And we see a number of our students want to pursue something in the military. So you can do that as well if you want to make a service commitment to going and returning to, whether it's the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. They will help pay for education as well. So those are the end of my slides. I'll open it up. If anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer it. No one wants to take that first plunge. All right. Well, here then. Thank you all for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the presentation. All of my information is available on the website, so please contact me if there's something you'd like more information about, or to put us, make sure we've got your student's name in our database.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Lots of great information there about what it means to be a medical student and the road to get there. So thank you for being with us this morning.
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. Well, we have one more session today, so we'll have you guys come back at 1:30. We'll have the food allergy lesson with Dr. Rosovic. So we would love to have you there. So again, it'll be the same Zoom information, so just log back on. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or send a text back from that number you got this morning. But I look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
In here, well, welcome to our third session of today. We're going to wrap up our second day of 4-in-1 here with Dr. Ben Rosovic, who's going to be talking to you all today about food allergies, and I'll let him explain the finer details of that. But we're so excited to have you back again, and we will be recording the session as well, so we'll send that out at the end of the week. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to send those over, and we'll open the floor at the end of the presentation here today. But as for now, I will hand it over to Dr. Rosovic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here to give this lecture to you guys and talk about this. A little bit about me. My name's Dr. Ben Rosovic. A lot of people just call me Dr. Ben. I'm a pediatrician here for OSU Pediatrics. I'm working as an attending in the hospital right now, and I'm really passionate about asthma, allergy, immunology, all things related to that stuff. But I'm actually applying for an allergy immunology fellowship right now myself, and so I'm hoping to, long-term deal with, mainly allergy, asthma, immunology, things like that, and both the pediatric and adult populations. That being said, I'm very passionate about just talking about things related to the field, especially food allergy, just because it affects so many people. And it's something that, when you're looking at in the acute side of things, like the quick side of things, you're thinking, emergency rooms, anaphylaxis, things like that. But a lot of it comes down to patient education, what's being done at home, and what people's level of comfort understanding with it is at home, and also at the workplace, at school, daycares, public pools, whatever, things like that. Especially when you're looking at kids and teenagers, when you're seeing, people that have these things, I think there needs to be an important amount of comfort with those people who are actually taking care of these people, specifically, school nurses, number one for sure, but also teachers. There are things that might be seen, And I think also just having a good amount of understanding as well, so that we're talking about it and families are taking note of it. Time and time again, you'll see things that people will kind of think, oh, is this an allergy? Is it a reaction? What is it? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to learn more about these things. And so that's kind of where this presentation came from. And so that being said, let's go ahead and start. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and do looking at a share screen. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of pull up a PowerPoint like this. And then I'll do it like this. And there, now, do you guys see just the PowerPoint now?
Yes, that looks great.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so here you go. So kind of, again, a few disclosures about me type stuff. I don't have any commercial or financial interests to disclose. And I was one of two chief pediatrics residents at OSU Pediatrics. And I just got on as an attending now here in the hospital. And I just graduated in June. And so I've started in July now here. And so the objectives of this presentation, mainly I want to talk to you guys about food allergy. I want to define it and talk about understanding of how food allergy develops. And I want to give you guys an appreciation of the significance of the identification of food allergy and provide information about how to read labels and also just promote food allergy awareness. Here are some organizations available for more information. All of these things are really useful for providers, but they're also really useful for just the general public. And so whether or not, and this is for really all ages of anyone who can, this is especially for high school students. I mean, these are things that people can read about, say if they're thinking about learning more about chemistry or thinking about learning more about allergies or medicine, things like that, science, or just community advocacy. These are all organizations that can give you information on that. And so what is food allergy? And so allergies are the result of a reaction that starts in the immune system. Antibodies, specifically IgE, are produced by the body against specific proteins, or allergens is that's a more medical term. IgE attaches to cells in the skin, lungs, gastrointestinal tract. That's anywhere that you're having any type of GI stuff, really. Repeat exposures triggers these cells to release chemicals or histamine that causes food allergy symptoms. And so when people are thinking about what are the symptoms of this stuff, you're going to be seeing things like itching, hives, swelling, diarrhea, wheezing, anaphylaxis, and worst case. Studies have shown that among food allergic infants, approximately 80% will reach tolerance by the 5th birthday, but 35% of them may eventually develop hypersensitivity to other foods. And when I say tolerance, that just basically means that they're going to grow out of it. And so the question then is that a lot of people wonder about, and this is something as simple as, mom and dad at home with a baby or someone in the hospital or in the clinic, wherever. Is it a food allergy? Like, what is this? Why is my kid, so uncomfortable when they eat this random thing? Non-IgE or non-immunoglobulin related reactions, they're generally not as dangerous. And so the thing that we're measuring and looking at is that IgE response. That's the allergy antibody. You can think about it as that way. There are other reactions to foods that are not allergies, such as intolerance. They're not the same thing. And so when you're looking at specific food induced allergic conditions, we're looking at IgE mediated, that's the acute onset, but then there's also things that you can see here specifically for IgE. Anaphylaxis is the one that is kind of the big one that people think about, but there's also oral allergy syndrome, immediate gastrointestinal hypersensitivity. You're going to be seeing things from anywhere between stomach upset, vomiting, pain, all the way to anaphylaxis, where you have multi-system involvement. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So who's affected by food allergies? 32 million Americans. From 2007 to 2016 alone, there was a 377% increase in treatment of diagnosed anaphylactic reactions to food. So that kind of translates to every 3 minutes a food allergy reaction sends someone to the emergency room. Data suggests that at least 10.8%, or more than 26 million of US adults, are food allergic, and nearly 19% of adults believe that they have a food allergy. It's crucial that adults with suspected food allergy receive appropriate confirmatory testing and counseling and ensure that food is not unnecessarily avoided and quality of life is not impaired. And this is true for anyone who's diagnosed with a food allergy. Some kids with food allergy develop natural tolerance, but food allergy can persist in adulthood for others. And so that being said, when we think about what are the most common food allergies, specifically up until recently, there used to be 8 main ones that people thought about. Now there's 9 actually. But the 8 most common ones up to, that are considered traditionally prior to the spring of this last year, actually, were going to be cow's milk proteins, eggs, peanuts, wheat, soy, fish, shellfish, and tree nuts. These were the top 8 that have for years been the top culprits for food allergies. And so when you're looking at the diagnosis of food allergy, it all comes down from clinical history. So any food can cause a food allergy. Skin tests are going to be the most common way to do it, but blood tests are also available. And then when you're thinking about, just the challenges of food allergies, well, whenever you're affected by this personally, or if you have family members affected by this, it's a major quality of life issue. Some food allergies can be outgrown during childhood, but making sure everyone's on the same page is so important. And so I have these pictures here, just kind of remind us of, where this can be, very burdensome. And so say you're with your family and friends getting together, you have to be thinking about what's being used to cook and what's being put on the table, and can this trigger you into having a reaction? And like I mentioned, the worst case scenario, an anaphylactic reaction. Here I have a picture of a restaurant there. I actually think it's in Stillwater. Another thing, when you're going out to restaurants, you want to make sure that you're looking at menus, and you have to be mindful of these things, which it's just an extra thing to worry about, but you're also thinking of the consequences of what if you miss something. And then here, I think specifically for kind of what we're talking about today as well, like when you're thinking about schools, high schools, here these kiddos look a little younger than high school, but this is still something that you'll see in older populations for sure. And in high school, it definitely becomes one of those things that people, generally speaking, they kind of like hide it a little bit, or what, for various reasons. They can, for some people, they're embarrassed by it, but they shouldn't be. It's a very common thing. And so when you're looking at severe reactions, specifically for anaphylaxis, it's going to affect your brain, potentially, face, breathing, circulation, stomach, and skin. I say these terms broadly because these are basically the systems that are affected. And so kind of whenever we're thinking about brain in a kid this age here, for example, and really this kind of also goes for adolescents too, teenagers, you might have this feeling of, doom, confusion, agitation. In the face specifically, you'll see swelling of lips or tongue that bother breathing, trouble swallowing. With regards to the breathing system, you'll see a shortness of breath, wheezing or coughing, tight or hoarse throat. And in circulation, you'll see a weak pulse, fainting or dizziness, pale or bluish skin color, things like that. And in the stomach, you'll see symptoms like vomiting or diarrhea specifically. In skin, you'll see hives or redness all over the body. And so whenever you have severe reactions, if you have a known food allergy and you have epinephrine and you have an action plan, if you think you need epinephrine, you need to give it. And so what is epinephrine? That's probably one of the things that a lot of people aren't really familiar with. And I think if you're having students or people around you that have food allergies, it's very important to be aware that epinephrine is the treatment for it. So kind of mentioned here, that's the treatment, and it's not necessarily needed for mild hives, but any respiratory symptoms, just give them epinephrine. Vomiting more than once or persistent abdominal pain, give epinephrine. And again, kind of like we mentioned, it's in the outer thigh only. After you give epinephrine, you're going to call 911 or go to the ER immediately afterwards. And then also something to know that with epinephrine auto-injectors, EpiPens, epinephrine, whatever, there's multiple words that people use to describe it, but it all comes down to it's just different ways to give epinephrine. The auto-injectors that you might have are going to have a recommended storage temperatures of 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, with a range of between 59 to 86. That means, especially in Oklahoma in the hot summer months, if you have epinephrine in your car, it can actually lose its efficacy. And that's what it comes down to. Like if it's outside the temperature limit, it can actually affect how the epinephrine is. But even still, if you have it, it's something you have, go ahead and use it. and especially kind of with regards to like how fast it can happen. I mean, if it's in a heated car, it can take just a few hours before the epinephrine will lose the potency, but it's still there. It's just not as good as it is. So just something to be mindful of for appropriate storage. And when you're looking at some auto injectors, here's an example of an EpiPen. Delayed epinephrine dosage, it's a well-documented risk factor for bad outcomes with food allergy and anaphylaxis. And oftentimes people will delay based on being scared of the device or side effects. But, epinephrine, I mean, it's one of those things that you give it to someone where, even if you don't need it, you can it's still going to give you like a little bit of a fast heart rate. You might kind of feel a little jittery. It's not going to be a dangerous thing. Obviously you don't want to do it, but worst case scenario, if you give it to someone, you're thinking, oh, did they actually need it? Like I said before, bad outcomes happen with food allergy and anaphylaxis when epinephrine is not given. So if you think you need it, use it. Typically the effects of epinephrine can wear off, and so you could have a second reaction potentially. So if someone needs epinephrine, it's also good to think that they're going to need observation after that administration in case they need a second dose. Generally speaking, whenever you see these auto injectors, specifically with the EpiPen here, what you'll do is there's a blue cap you can see here, and there's different ways to think about it, like blue to sky, orange to thigh. What you do is you'll take out that blue cap, and then you'll just go ahead and you'll inject it into your thigh, and you'll wait 10 seconds for it to kind of actually administer the medication. And whenever you're putting it in your thigh, you'll actually hear a click, actually, kind of what you can see in this picture and what's kind of shown in this graphic. And so here are some examples of some other auto injectors. This one specifically is called the ALLOPATHIC. This one actually has voice instructions, but that being said, you can go ahead and just give it, and it just will cut the voice instructions short. And here on this other picture here, there's just another example of other various epinephrine auto injectors. And so that being said, if you're around students or you're around people that need epinephrine or have food allergies that they've been diagnosed EpiPen to have, or they've been prescribed an EpiPen to have for the diagnosis, it's always good to be comfortable with it. And so I always tell this to parents and to families, just make sure that if someone else is taking care of your kid during the day, or if you're a teenager advocating for yourself, make sure that people are comfortable with EpiPens, how to use them. So in a high school setting, talk to the school nurse for sure. Reading food labels. And so the US Food and Drug Administration considers these following major food allergens. While any food can cause an adverse reaction, there are 8 types of food that account for about 90% of reactions. And I should say that this was the case. Now it's they're actually expanding the group of foods that are incorporated. And so milk, wheat, egg, tree nuts, peanuts, fish, crustacean shellfish, soy, these are the main things that counted for, classically thinking, like 90% of the food allergies. But that being said, very recently, there was a lot of advocacy and a lot of community volunteering based events that kind of pushed policy to be made to actually add sesame labeling as well. So now that's one of the new. So now you can think of it as 9 major allergens that need to have food labels for. And so with that being said, when you're looking at food labels, food allergies affect every part of your life. And so it's to think about what's in the foods. The best way to think about and know what's in the foods is you just have to read the label every time. And so manufacturers have 2 options to indicate a major allergen on product labels. The first option is to list the allergen in parentheses after the ingredient. The second option is to list the allergen at the end of the ingredient list. Often this contains statement is bolded, so you can kind of see here for examples. If it says it may contain, it's probably a good idea to avoid it as well, just because it might actually contain it. I will say that there are certain things that, like this does not apply to foods that are placed in a container or wrapper for customers' orders, or food from a bakery or sandwich or things like that. So just, you have to just ask at that situation. And then looking at food allergy labels, you just have to be really careful. So here, for example, the non-dairy and dairy-free, they don't always mean that there are no milk ingredients. And so here, for example, like this non-dairy creamer, Well, you can see in the ingredient list, sodium caseinate, a milk derivative, is there. Thankfully, it says a milk derivative there, but sometimes you might just read something like that, so you won't know. So that's why it's just so important to be cautious. And so the non-dairy, dairy-free labels, those aren't really necessarily reliable. Same thing with classroom safe, things like that. Classroom safe also won't exclude all true allergies either. And so you can kind of see on the back there, for example, that would not be safe for students with milk and soy allergies based on what's in the ingredients there. The C here, like the thing at the bottom right of the screen, for teachers, this label is from a bottle of hand soap that shows that it contains almond oil. And so almonds are a type of tree nut, and so this soap could cause reactions in kids with almond allergy. So that's why you want to be kind of careful when you see things that say classroom safe, non-dairy creamer. Those are just vague terms. You want to really look at the ingredients. And again, like this is just kind of another example of like how the may contain labels might be a little misleading. Contamination of what they may contain can vary significantly from what's actually there. And so when you're looking at just different safe alternatives for snacks, whether or not be with how you're planning schools or events in schools or whatever, there's a lot of resources you can look at online. Kids with Food Allergies is it's a division of the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. They got great stuff. They kind of recommendations for kids, and I know for high school kids this isn't really as applicable, but it's just really helping people choose their own allergy-friendly snacks, and you want to have those snacks available, things like that. And then when it comes down to just your daily management of food allergies, you want to talk to healthcare providers and schools, read food labels every time. Precautionary labels, again, they all pose the same risk, so you want to be really careful with that, and just don't be afraid to ask questions. If there's no label on something, just don't eat it. And allergy-free, allergy-safe, they're not always safe. And so if you're, if a child or grandkid or whatever has been prescribed an auto-injector, just make sure everyone who's dealing with that kid knows how to use it. And me, as a pediatrics trained person, I consider anyone under 21 to be a kid. So this definitely relates to high school students. So for anyone who has a food allergy who needs epinephrine, whoever's going to be taking care of that person or whoever's going to be near that person, specifically in a school setting, like if there's a school nurse available, they need to know how to actually use the epinephrine. And same thing for high school students. If you guys do have epinephrine auto injectors, it's just really important to know how to use it. And so if you have any questions about it, just always ask. It's just really important to talk to, patients early to teach them how to also advocate for themselves. And so I just want to say one thing, since we are talking about food allergies, there are a lot of home kits that people buy that they think that, oh, well, I might have something, I'm gonna go ahead and get it. These tests aren't good. They have been well studied and they're just not effective. They're looking for IgG, so it's just not the same thing that we even look for or order whenever we're actually running allergy testing in the office. The actual Academy for Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, they don't believe the tests are useful or effective at all. And there's also a lot of false positives that are really common. So, sometimes people will get it, they'll have a false positive, and they'll just start removing things, and they'll still have, best case scenario, they'll just, have a really annoying diet. Worst case scenario, they'll miss stuff and they'll think that they're being appropriately treated when they're not. And then when you're looking at peanut allergy specifically, the recommendations are based heavily on specifically the Learning Early About Peanut study. That's like the LEAP study. And so this observational study suggests that early oral intake of a variety of foods and food allergens may reduce incidence of food allergy in the first 10 years of life. So this is specifically just some a little bit of guidelines I put in this presentation to talk about how to introduce peanut allergy and peanut allergens early in life, but this doesn't really apply to you guys, I think. But just kind of an interesting thing to know about how food allergies develop and the pathophysiology of things. And so really just a quick note on this, just if a baby's able to eat and tolerate foods early based on their development, then the sooner they get peanuts introduced or allergens introduced, the better. And that being said, with this presentation, I always want to put support on these things. And so here you can see, this is just a website you can use of how to find an allergist. If you think you have a food allergy, you have questions about food allergies, this link here is available, allergist.aaai. That's the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. The Quad AI for short, for obvious reasons. That website's available. You can always also contact me specifically, like I'm always available. And there's also the Oklahoma Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology Society, and also the Oklahoma chapter for the American Academy of Pediatrics. Those are all available for people to look into. But again, I think talking to an allergist will probably be one of the best places to start. So that being said, here are my references for this presentation. And that's basically it. And so I want to go ahead and give you guys some time for any questions or concerns you might want to bring up.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to chat those over. One thing I was curious about was that increase, the 337% increase in treatment of anaphylactic reactions. Is there a reason for that?
And there's various reasons that people are looking into. One of the most obvious things is we're just looking more for it. And so maybe before what would have been, just brought to the ER, they may have not recorded it or looked for it, or maybe like had that same connection. And so now that we're actually looking for it a lot more, it's like popping up. But also people are, I mentioned this thing with the peanut allergies in the LEAP study, kind of because, a lot of people are now, for a while, people thought, okay, let's avoid allergies early in life. Let's wait till later on. Well, what they're now finding is by doing that, you're actually having a higher likelihood of having allergies and food allergies in your population. And so that's why they did that study, to kind of say, okay, let's actually start lower. And a lot of it kind of just comes from people just trying to do, they're trying to do what's best for their children. And so an unfortunate consequence of waiting late to introduce these foods, well, you ended up actually having a lot more food allergies out there. That's one thing, but that's a very small thing. I think really what it comes from is that we're looking for it a lot more. And I think there is a little bit of the population is getting a little bit more allergic, so to speak. But I think more studies are going to be necessary to kind of really determine if that's the case. I think one of the easier answers is that we're just really more aware of these things and diagnoses.
Okay, and it looks like Carly sent a question over. What is the difference between IgE and IgG?
So when you're looking at different types of immunoglobulins in your body is going to be producing these as antibodies effectively, essentially. And so basically just kind of comes down to like the structure of it. And so here, like this is the IgE antibody that's used for against specific proteins and allergens. And so really the difference is that like the response you're going to get with the IgE antibody or your basically your allergy antibody, it's going to trigger totally different cascade of events than your IgG. It's just a different antibody. There's other antibodies in your body, like there's immunoglobulin M, for example. And depending on like what you're looking at in terms of a disease process, these will mean different things. But for our intents and purposes, just remember it's important to think about that the food allergy, you're looking for that allergic antibody, the IgE. And so if you're measuring just random antibodies, you're looking specifically for the IgE. So a lot of those home tests, they're looking for the IgG, which is not really going to tell us anything. But it might be elevated, but that's not going to necessarily, we can't make that connection. Oh, that's allergy.
Okay, and Rayleigh asked, what's the reason for putting the and I'm not sure how to even pronounce
epinephrine,
it.
epi. Yeah. What's the reason for putting it?
In your outer leg.
In your outer leg. And so that has to do with the location of it. And so in terms of, that's your muscle. And so if that's just going to be the best place for a distribution, you want to put it, that's kind of where they do it. You don't want to put it in your stomach. You don't want to put it in your neck or something, or in a vein. You want it to be in your muscle, because that's just based on how the way it's prepared. They want it to kind of get into that muscle tissue and then kind of disperse appropriately into your system systemically. But you don't want to inject it into anywhere else other than that. I've actually heard of people injecting auto injectors when they think they're having an anaphylaxis. I've heard of people like stabbing their stomachs. That doesn't do anything. And so thankfully that person was fine. They were very uncomfortable, but they were fine.
Okay, and Aubrey asked, she said that her mom never had a peanut allergy, but then in her mid-30s, she developed a peanut allergy. And how did that happen? She used to love eating peanut butter or just roasted peanuts, and now she can't even eat one without her throat closing.
Yeah. And so that is just a weird thing that can happen with your immune system. And so, when I think of allergies, I think, everything from seasonal allergies, cough, runny nose, all these things. I like to think about your immune response to things, because that's where it all comes from. Sometimes you can just lose tolerance, or your ability to do things. Like you can just lose that tolerance for various reasons. Sometimes it can be something um, as simple as, oh, well, you had it and then you stopped having it, and so your body has an immune response to that thing you were having. So if you don't have it for a while, your body's going to interpret that as an attack. Other times it can be really quick. Like, I'm sure her mom, I'm sure that there wasn't probably a significant time that peanuts were ingested. It just kind of happens. And these things are just kind of, they just unfortunately happen over time. But that being said, there are ways, specifically with peanut allergy, they are looking into treatments that can help you. One, if you have the food allergy to begin with in life and just something that you've always had, there are treatments for that. But there's also treatments if you've developed it specifically for peanuts. Other food allergies, unfortunately, they're still working on better ways to treat that. But for right now, peanuts, there is some good hope that people can kind of get management for that appropriately. And so for in this situation, I'd probably recommend that an allergist be talking about like therapy for that.
Okay, are there any other questions for Dr. Rosovic before we wrap up our session today? Okay, we did get one from Addison. She said, what should you do if someone goes into anaphylactic shock and doesn't have the EpiPen?
EpiPen. And so at that point, unfortunately, I mean, epinephrine is a treatment. And so at that point, just call for help, number one, and get, the whoever has ability to get emergency help there, the better. And so a lot of places, like a lot of schools, I'm not really sure what the school nurses do. I'm not sure if there's, in terms of epinephrine available, like I don't know if they have it in their offices or anything like that, but that's something that, to know. But if you're there and you don't have it, just call for help, call 911, get someone there fast. You can have epinephrine. And these people, if they start having throat swelling, don't try to stick anything in. Like, don't try to, like, if you think they're choking on something, do not try to take anything out of their mouth if you think there's food in their mouth, because the risk of trying to get something out of the mouth, you can push something more in the throat. And if it's swelling, it can be a worse situation. So don't mess with anything here. Just maybe like gently elevate this person, like if they're on their back or they're sitting, like have them up. Because at that point, a big concern is the airway. And so if someone's lying down or flat, like that can be a problem. So better to have them an incline or kind of sitting if possible, and just kind of have them have the most comfortable way for them to breathe. And the best way to breathe is going to be like you, like standing or sitting up, like straight up actually, and maybe lean forward a little bit or something, and just trying to tell a person to calm down and just get help there as fast as you can, preferably EMS, someone like that. And you just call 911. That's probably what I would do in that situation. Unfortunately, like I said, epinephrine is a treatment for it, so you can't just reverse it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Give you guys a minute here. These have all been really great questions.
Yeah, seriously. Carly, Rayleigh, Aubrey, Addison, you guys ask really good questions. These are questions that I would, med students will ask me these things too. So, and some residents too. So these are definitely good questions.
Okay, well, if you think of anything later on, feel free to send those over to me and I'll get those questions over to Dr. Rosovic so we can get those answered for you. But thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Rosovic. That was a really great session and lots of information on what food allergies are. So thank you again.
No problem at all. I'm always happy to do it. And you guys are more than welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that wraps up our event for today. So we will have a day off tomorrow, and then we'll pick back up on Thursday. We'll have healthcare administration Q&A with one of our students at 9:30, and then we'll end 4-on-1 at 11 with a medical student Q&A. So I'll send that information out on Thursday, but again, tomorrow will be an off day, but I hope to see you first thing on Thursday. So thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.